Morning. It is 11 a.m. and it's a Tuesday or a Thursday, so you know what's going on. We're in the bunker. So we're back here in the Powermetrix bunker, and today, by popular demand, the first time that we shot the 3 series, the integrated psych test video and webinar, we didn't like the way it came out, so we didn't actually have it on the site for you to see it in case you're not seeing it live. So we're redoing that one, and plus we've added some things to what we did the first time. We are this time going to do a full integrated psych test. So we will hit everything, PTs, the CTs, so we're going to hit everything today. So as usual, this is in our COVID series right here. Thursday, we're going to do the virtual tour. See if you can pick out what's my favorite part of the virtual tour on Thursday. I think you'll probably be able to pick that out. Today, we talked about, we're going to do a full site test. So we're going to actually talk about creating and setting up sites. We're going to, like we always do, we're going to verify the connections and how you should make your connections. We're going to run a customer load test, a CT burden and ratio test. Whew. Excuse me, I almost sneezed. A PT ratio test, a CT burden measurement test, a PT ratio test, and then we're going to do a phantom load test. Okay, so we're going to go through all these different tests, and as we're going through them, we'll obviously talk about things and look at the connections because you're going to have to move your connections on some of the tests. So we'll go over all that as we're doing this, okay? So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and start us out with a prayer so I don't forget it at the end. Haven't yet, but don't want to. So we'll start out with a prayer before we get started, all right? Father, thank you so much for this time together. We have finally seen a little lift in this crazy weather here in Knoxville, and in a couple of days we're going to have a string of 80-degree days, which from what we've heard, we get a lot of conflicting information, but it sounds like that'll help with this whole virus thing. So we're glad to see that coming. And we've had different stories here in Knoxville of people that we know and situations, but you know, it all comes down to relationships, doesn't it? I mean, Jarrett was just talking about how he got to see his mom over in Nashville, and she got to see her grandson being safe and and doing it. But it's all about relationships, Lord, and our relationship with you is the most important we could have. So thank you so much for what you did for us, what your son did to pay the price so that I can even pray to you right now. Thank you for the relationships I have in my life, Lord, and these men here in this room and people from my church and friends. And Father, in times like this, that's what we lean on, is relationships with people that we can count on. And Father, I just thank you for those relationships. And most importantly, I thank you for my relationship with you. So all of these things we say and ask now, according to the will of the one we paid it all, my brother, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Let's get rolling. So, looking at the test here, if what I'm going to do is, this is if I was already starting into a test, but I just want to show this as well. If you wanted to get back out to the main menu, people have asked me this, you just hit deselect site, number 5. And that takes you back out to the main menu. So if you wanted to get out and go back to your main menu, that's how you do that, okay? I had somebody ask me about that, so we started out that way. So looking at this, we've talked about this before, but just going to go over it again in case someone didn't get to see it before. We're going to show you how to select a site on here and how to create a site. So right now I don't have any site selected, and you can tell by you look up in the upper right-hand corner, it has none for the site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit number 1 for select site. But you see at the bottom, F2, remember we're always F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, and F6. The function buttons across the bottom always take precedence over any of the other buttons. Okay, so I've had people sit there hitting enter before, but actually you need to hit select over here on F6. So they always take precedence, okay? Especially the gold button. F6 is always our favorite button, right? That we hit it more than anything. So I'm going to show you just real quick on a new site on how to set a site up. So it's going to load site editor in here. Here's where, now remember, there's 3 ways to do this. I can load it up while I'm standing here at the pole with the test kit. I can also do it back at the shop on Meter Site Manager, or if I wanted to, I can get a USB or a keyboard, and I can enter it in that way. Okay, I can use these buttons right here if I want to, like the old flip phone. I can get me a wireless keyboard, or I can do it off Meter Site Manager. So when you set up a site, you need to put in some unique site ID here, right? And we don't recommend the meter number because if you move that meter, it's not at that site anymore. That's totally up to you as the customer. But we have GPS numbers people use, account numbers, and then you would enter in the meter form. And I'm just going to put one in here. We won't save this one, but I'm just going to show you. Everything above my glove right here is required. Everything after that, it's up to you if you want to put that in there. The more information you put in there, the more you can sort through Meter Site Manager to find, in other words, if you had entered in there, 4S, you could search for all your 4S's. If you actually entered in the next time you wanted to test that site, you could look for what sites are coming up next month, and you could sort it that way. So all this is required up here. So I'm just going to put in one here. And you notice then that the two gold ones for sure, if you don't put anything in there, you're not going to be able to get anything done. So I'm going to use my forward space to go to the next field. And if I just put a 9 in there, you've heard me say this before, if you put the 9 in and 9S in there as the form, what it'll do is it'll say, okay, I'm going to go to the most common service and service type. So it went to a 4-wire Y, it went to the service type for a 3-phase 4-wire Y, 3 voltage, 3 current, transformer rated. And that's just our sorting number for our software and setups, that last number. So I would do that. I would use my forward space again, which takes me to the next field, because the forward space and back space move between the fields, whereas the arrows around the enter button move you within the field. Okay? So you got to be careful. If you start hitting these buttons, you're changing things within that field. And it's happened in the field where they've hit this button thinking they were moving to the next field, changed something, then realized, moved on forward, but didn't notice they had changed maybe a service type, okay? So you want to make sure you use this to move to the next field. So I'm going to hit that. I'm going to go to my forward space, 4-wire Y. I get down here to, all that looks good. I'm going to get down to my test setup because that's what we're doing today. The test setup is for your IST, or integrated site test. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to hit my drop down, which this is my drop down button, which also opens up boxes for me and checks boxes. So I'm hitting my drop down button. And here's where you would select one, or you could go to Test Editor here and you could create a site. So when you're in the test setup, that's when Test Editor comes up. It doesn't show up on F4 unless you're in that test setup. And I could go there and go Test Editor if I wanted to. And I could hit a new setup. Default 1 is the one that comes from the factory on a new test kit. And default 1 is you do a customer load test on the meter, and you do a burden ratio test on the CTs. Okay, but if you wanted to set your own up, you would just hit New. I would enter in a name for it, and then I just start checking the boxes and fill it in, and from then on, it's on there. And you would just use it. You could reference it when you created a new site. You could go over and click on your Phantom Load setups, and this one would be in there. You could select it, and from then on, it would be married to that site. It's always the front end setup for Powermetrix, and from then on you don't have to do any more setup. It's just that first time setting everything up. Okay? So I'm going to hit previous up in the upper right hand corner, which takes me to the previous screen. And I'm going to look here and say, and don't forget to put your case of T in. That's something people forget, because what happens is it goes to 1 as a default. So if it goes to 1 as a default, you're going to get a screwy registration number and go, what happened? And you didn't put in the case of T up there. Okay? So this up is required. 2 things I'll point out real quick that I show guys when I'm out in the field doing training is the billing multiplier might be a good one that while you're there, if you guys write the billing multipliers on the inside of your can doors, you want to just do a quick check and make sure it's correct. Look at your PTs, your CTs, and then figure it out and say, wait a minute, I need to double check that. And you can enter that in there as a double check. And then moving forward, let's say a storm happens and somebody comes up there and changes things. You got linemen that change things there. This is always something you can use as a reference to double check that billing multiplier, all right? The other one I would say is something you might consider. I'm using my forward space to get over to it. Would be the next test. We set them up by revenue, of course. The high revenue customers are the ones that we want to check more frequently because a problem will cost you more money in a shorter amount of time. So here, I'm going to hit my drop down box again. It starts out at 6 months and then goes year to year to year. And what you can do is you can set up the next time you want to test this site. Your high rev sites, you're probably going to want to set up once a year. And then maybe you have it tiered like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. Of course, that's totally up to you. But that way we can sort by that. So you could say, what test do I have coming up in June? Well, if last June you said a year from now I want to test that site, it would show up. So it can help you set up routes. You're not just running here and there on it, so you can actually set up routes for guys, okay? So I'm going to hit previous again, because I'm not going to save this, and I'm going to discard it. Because I've got one in there. If you've been watching the webinars, you can see Mullins finally cleaned up my my 3 series here for me. I used to have a ton on here, so it's going to run a little faster now, and we don't have all this. I don't have to page down. I don't have to keep hitting the page down here to get down to the stuff that was at the end, which is where our stuff was. So I've got just the 9S in there. So I'm going to hit select, F6 for that site. And here's where you can put in technicians' names if you want to. Any comments? I just had someone ask me about this. You can put in some notes. Just yesterday, someone asked me, where can I put in comments in here so that I can see them on the reports? And right here, you could put comments in here if you want to about that test session. And you'll also see, as we can, on that site, when we were setting the site up, you could also, in the instructions, put some like big dog in the yard or whatever you want to put in there, and it would be attached to that site. This is for the test session. Okay? So I'm going to hit continue. So now I am on my site 9S, because you can see it up in the upper right-hand corner. So I know where I am at all times. Just look in the upper right-hand corner and you can tell where you are. So I am on my site that I created, which is called 9S. And so now I have options, right? Number 2 is my integrated site test, which is what we're going to perform today. But if I wanted to just test a meter, either a phantom load, if you have the load box, or a customer load, then I would select 3 for meter testing. If I wanted to just test a PT or a CT, I would choose number 4 for instrument transformer testing. 5, of course, I showed you first. If I wanted to deselect this site, go back to the main menu, I would hit 5. Utilities is where, when we come to do the training with you, anytime you buy one of our test kits, you get a free day of on-site training. When we come to do the training for you, we'll go into utilities, and that's where we can set up what's pass or fail for the meter, what's pass or fail for the CTs. So you'll tell us, hey, we go 2%, we go 0.2%, whatever it is, and we will set that up, and from then on, it's in there. Like we said, it's that front-end setup with the Powermetrix. So once you set that up, then that'll be in there. And then 7 is recall data, which we're going to do today, which I recommend before you disconnect everything and leave a site, I would look at recall data, just make sure you didn't fat finger something or miss something, and everything's in there. Okay? So I'm going to select number 2. And number 2, as you can see here, I've got the test set up called Bench. I created it, integrated site test. I'm going to do a customer load test. I've set it up for, you've heard me say before, 30 seconds or 3 revs, whichever comes first. If you do, when you first set this up, there's 0 in the time. So it is set up for 3 revs. You can change either one of those. I could set that up for 5 revs. If I leave it as 0 here, it's going to go 5 revs, revolutions or pulses, before it completes the test. But if I put a time in as well, then it's whichever it sees first, the time or the revolutions or pulses. Okay? So for me, I like to put 30 seconds or 3 revs in case I'm down south swarming mosquitoes around my head and have a really light load. That is definitely sufficient for you to get a good test. Okay? We're also going to do a phantom load test, and we're going to do a CT test, burden and ratio, and we're going to do a PT ratio test and a CT burden test as well. So we're going to go through all of those. So we're going to hit next. So you've heard us say this many times. This is showing you all of the green dots here are saying for the test you selected back on that integrated site test, here's where you need to make all of your connections. Okay? So it's saying if you're going to do all those tests you said, you're going to test the PTs, the CTs, and the meter, then here's where you need to connect it. I need to get on my secondary voltage, A, B, C, and neutral. And that's, of course, my alligator clips on the voltage terminals on my test switch. Then I've got my secondary current, A, B, and C, which are my duct bills, which I have also inserted into the test switch. And then down here now, since I'm going to perform the PT ratio test is telling me you also need to be on your secondary for your voltage, okay? I'm sorry, primary voltage, excuse me. So I'm here, primary voltage A, B, and C. My secondary, I'm already with the alligator clips. And then you're also seeing down here, I've got my primary current, which are my red flexes to perform my current ratio test. So I have to be on my primary voltage and my secondary voltage to perform a voltage ratio test. I have to be on my primary current and my secondary current to perform a CT ratio test. So we've got everything connected here. I just go where Jarrett points. So I just want to show, here are the, you can see you've got the, our PTs up here. So you can see where we made our connections for our PTs, okay? You can see that I came right here, and I'm using our VP600, which is for your lower voltages. We also have, of course, the high voltage probe. This is our lower voltage probe, which we're going to use here. So what I've done is I've connected right here. I've got on my 3 PTs here. All of our returns are tied together, so I've got my white connected here, and then I've got A, B, and C phases, okay? So then over here, for my current, to pick up my primary current, I've got my 3 red flexes. I've got them here, here, and here. So what it's going to do is it's going to compare what it sees from my 3 red flexes on the primary with my dump bills here on the secondary, and then it's going to compare my 3 primary voltages here with my secondary voltages off of my alligator clips. And that's where we're going to get our ratios for both voltage and current. Okay? So we're looking good there. We've got all our connections. So we're going to hit next. So Chris has made an adjustment, which I like. We're not showing that unity anymore because that's not really real world, is it? So we're looking at our vectors now. Now I want to make a point here. In the past, with some of the curveballs and stuff that Mullins has thrown at me during this, if you see something crazy on this, we're in the test now, right? So I don't have all these options down here, you see, for my vectors. Whereas if I just connect up and look at my vectors and don't start into a test, I can switch and look at the primary current, right? I also have the reference button that I can hit. So for the service type that you've selected in the meter form, you can say, man, I don't know if that vector looks quite right, so I'm going to hit the reference, and if I hit reference, it will show you the correct vectors for that service and service type that you've chosen, okay? But once you're in the test, you can see those aren't available. So as we've done in some of the previous webinars, when we saw something that looked really screwy on the vectors, we backed back out and just went to the connected view, and we can just look at it, okay? So in this case, let's point something out here. As we've always said, how do we get paid? It's we, you and I. What are we worried about? Current times voltage times power factor gives you watts, right? So when I look at this, we've said it before, the bigger the angle between my primary, my voltage rather, and my current vectors on one phase, on that same phase, which for us, we try and make it simple, red, yellow, blue, A, B, C. So if my 2 A phase vectors, which would be my red vectors here, if I look at them, my voltage vectors are always open-headed arrow. My currents are always the heavier and closed arrowheads. So between these, I can see I have a larger angle on A phase than I do B phase or C phase. So what does that mean? I'll give it a second. Hopefully people are saying in the chat, if I have a bigger angle between my voltage and my current on the same phase, my power factor is less. They use that function of the cosine to do that, and all the cosine says is, if I take the cosine of an angle, the bigger the angle, the smaller the number. And so that's what we're dealing with here. The bigger the angle, the smaller is my power factor number. And if I look here, I can see the power factor on A versus the power factor on B and C. I'm 0.865 versus 986 and 967. So you can see here I have less, a smaller number. So what would you think on the watts? I would have less watts, right? So let's just look at that to make sure. I'm going to hit now the other hot button. Our hot buttons are down this right side right here. I can always look at vectors or waveforms, or one of those is a table of information. We call it the RMS table. So I'm going to hit that button. And this shows out what we just said, right? Because we're looking at the watts in bold. That's what's important to us. That's how we get paid. So we can see that the watts are less on A than they are B and C. And we look right above it and what caused that, and we see right above its power factor. And I see that smaller power factor on A than I do B or C. So all of it connects and makes sense. Bigger angle should be worse power factor. Then I can flop over and look at this and say, yep, it is a smaller number, worse power factor. I'm multiplying. So when I multiply by a smaller number, I end up with less watts. So all of that makes sense and all of it connects. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. Or when I'm in Mexico, they say continuar. So remember the Rigor rule that I always use. I try and wait for 2 pulses. So once I get my 2 pulses, so I don't have some nuisance pulse in there, I hit start test. So what is it going to do now? It is going to say, okay, PowerMaster says, here's what you told me. You said, here are the pulses actual. So it's actually every time it pulses, that number is going to change by 1. It's the actual pulses. This is what we're measuring on the expected. So it's saying, I'm taking that current times voltage times power factor, and I'm saying, you told me that every time this thing pulsed, I should have 1.8 watts, according to the way you entered this site in the beginning. If that's the case of T on it, then I'm saying, okay, I've had 3 pulses, and then calculating using that 1.8 watts, I said, well, actually, when I took the watts and divided by 1.8, I came up with 2.999 expected pulses. So when you do that, you compare those 2 numbers, and we get 100.033 as our registration for a customer load test. And remember, the customer load test is actually connecting and using the load, just like it says, the load of the customer. So I'm using these CTs to provide my current versus using a load box. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Shout out to Landis and Gear. Those are good numbers. And thank you to Tri-State for that meter, by the way. Okay, so we're going to now go to next test. Because remember, that's one of the keys to doing an integrated site test. You can customize them for different sites, and once they're attached to that site, you're just hitting next, next. I don't jump from menu to menu. It's in there. Okay, so we're just going to go down the line and perform these tests. So before it performs another test, it's going to show you this. So it's showing here's how we should have the connections. Looks good. So now we're going to test our CTs. And since we used 3 of the flex probes, it's just going to go from A phase to B phase to C phase. My personal preference is I like to use 3 flexes because once I connect all the 3, I get back out away from that pad mount and I do all my testing away from the pad mount. I'm not staying in there moving from phase to phase to phase. Some guys prefer to only use 1. But I like to connect all 3 and then stand back and watch the test run. So, and also you could have some changes in load in between while you're moving that flex around, so that can also affect you. So I'm just a proponent of the 3 flexes. And I can already hear people on the other line going, yeah, that's because you sell them and you want to sell 3. No, I'm just saying from a safety standpoint and changing of the loads and getting in and getting out and standing out there, I like to use 3. So you can see here, we pass. For Powermetrix, green is good, red is bad. So if they had failed, it would be a red on there. So, but they all passed. So we can see here we got a pass on A, B, and C. So we just, as I said, since we've got this integrated site test set up, I just hit next test and go to the next one. So it's going to show me again. So now we're testing our PTs, and the PTs are 2.5 to 1 PTs, as you can see here. And remember, we've talked about this before, you don't have to enter in the size of the PTs or CTs. Because the PowerMaster is smart enough to recognize it, says, okay, when I do my ratio, I've come out with 2.49 to 1. I'm going to say that's a 2.5 to 1. Okay, so it can do that, or you can enter it in there. Now, there is a difference there on some of the tests if you don't enter in, like the bird measurement we're going to do in a minute. If you don't enter it in there, it won't give you a pass or fail, but it'll definitely give you the numbers. So you might want to take the time to enter it in there, but it is not required. The PowerMaster can test without that, okay? So I got a pass on all those. Pretty consistent there on our PTs up here. So I'm going to go next test again. Now here's where we're going to do, whenever you see that, you know what's coming, right? We're doing a phantom load test. Why? Because it says phantom load test right there. Also, we know when we're using the jumpers. You know, the jumpers are the big key for me. When I see anything about the jumpers, I know I'm going to take my load box out of the equation, and I'm going to put the load box in the equation now. I'm taking the CTs out of the equation, I'm putting the load box in. So to use the load box to drive, I'm going to drive through my duck bills. So I'm going to move over to here, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to drive with my duck bills. So using the duck bills to drive, we always remember for a PowerMaster and for these duck bills, it's in the white, out the black, or out the black and in the white. And when you're reading, when you're just reading that secondary current, it's in the white, out the black. But when I'm driving my current there, it's out the black and in the white. I'm driving the current out the bottom of my duck bills here, out the black, and I'm going to drive it through this meter and come back through the white and back to my test kit. Problem is, the very first thing I'm going to do is open up my shunts. Well, now I do not have a complete path to go from the bottom of the duck bill through the meter and back through the white to make it back to my load box. So that's why the jumpers are required. And so what I did was, I've already got my jumpers attached at the bottom here. I always do it, never do all three of them the same color, because I have people ask me, do you have to have, is orange at the bottom and gray at the top? No, it does not matter. We've just colored them different colors so it's easier to track when you get up inside a crowded can and you're trying to keep track of which is which, okay? So we just made them a different color for that. It is not required to have either one top or bottom, okay? So here I let these connected here at the bottom. I always make my connection on the phase at the bottom of the return, okay? One way in my pea-brain when I was first doing this that I got it in my head to remember is, when I was out in the field, just like y'all figuring this out, I said, okay, I've always got to get around that long handle down there to make my connection at the bottom on that phase. I'm always getting around the long handle. I have a long swing handle on the return. I've got a short swing handle on my shunts right here. So I know I'm going bottom of the return on A phase, and I'm coming over here, and I'm going to the top I can see, there you go. The top of the shunt blade. Bottom of the return, get around that long handle, and then top, right here, of my shunt blade. On this particular test switch, this one's a little janky here. You got to kind of watch what you're doing here. I've got my 3 shunts are here, and I've got my voltages here, here, and here. And you can see neutral, and then all 3 of my returns are over here on the far right. Okay? So that means I need to go from bottom of the return on A phase to over here at the top of the shunt on A phase. So I'm going to come over on the bottom of the return on B phase to the top of the shunt on B phase. And then last but not least, I'm going to do C phase here. And I'm going to go bottom of the return on C, where my gray is, over here to the top of the shunt on C. So you go from the bottom, the returns, bottom of the returns, to the top of the shunts. Okay, so I've got all 3 phases done here. This is the one when I was first learning I took a little bit more time with, because as we all know on this test switch, if I start making the wrong connections around here, that's when it can get a little dicey. So for safety's sake, please make sure you go bottom. I get around that long swing handle of the return at the bottom of the phase, and on the same phase, I go to the top of the short stroke shunt blade. Okay? So I'm going to hit continue on. Now you'll notice this is very similar to the customer load test, but I've got some added stuff in there because there's a load box involved now. So I have to make sure we're okay and cool with the load box. And the PowerMaster products, what I like is they send out VA and they look for a VA to come back. And if they notice they don't get the right VA back, they're saying, whoa, I might have something loose, open connection, where, you know, and you don't want some, you know, one of your coworkers leaning against the can and you fire up a load box and there's something open, or you don't want to damage your load box. I know Jim Richards and I were down in Florida, and down there, I mean, it looks like the Emerald City. I'm going to go ahead and hit, I got my 2 pulses. I know it looks like the Emerald City down there in South Florida with some of these test switches because they're just that green. You open it up and all these ants are pouring out and it's just solid green, and you think, uh-oh. Well, I can tell you, if you don't work on that a little bit, and Jim went and found us actually a nail file, and we had to file on it and work on it. If Jim hadn't done that, I don't know if we would have been able to test that, because it was sending out the VA and it was not getting anything back, and it was saying, no, this is not going to work. So let's see what happens. Make sure everything connected right. So I'm going to hit next again. So when I saw that error on there, when I hit previous, it took me to the beginning of the test. So we're going to have to watch this for a minute. Wait a minute. Open here. We connected okay here. Here. We're connected here. Connected here. That doesn't look good. See, I'm here at the bottom of A. I'm over here at the top of A. B, and I'm at the top of B. C, and I'm at the top of C. Okay, so looking at that, it looks like I've got everything cross-phase. Looks like every single one of them is cross-phase. All my field guys out there are going, yeah, it's just a normal day. Yeah. See what I'll do. Just go back out. Let's try this. Let's go previous out. We'll run just phantom load test. If you didn't have issues, it wouldn't be field work. Let's try this, folks. I'm going to go a meter test, 3. I'm just going to do a phantom load test, number 2. Yeah, I'm doing a phantom load test right now. So that's good. Continue. Let's try it again. Grab some water. So my connections all look good. Bottom of here, top to there. Bottom of there, top to there. Bottom of there, top to there. Let's wait for the Ray rule. Okay. So this is, you know me, I'm a field guy. So this is one of those situations where you back out and try something else for whatever reason. It didn't like it. I wish I could tell you why, but for some reason that first time it didn't like it. It was giving me some, but we looked at the vectors and saw that was screwy, so we knew it wasn't going to work. So I'm not sure why that happened, but if you back out, you can always back out and just try it. You can go to an individual test. You saw what I did. I went to 3 and chose a phantom load test and did it that way. Oh, and I've set it, it's been set up for 2, 2 and 1 on the pulses. You see over on the far right side so that it's faster. So we go 2, 2 and 1. And if you didn't have issues like this in the field, then Ray wouldn't be on the phone all day long. So the professor wouldn't be talking to you. You weren't throwing me a curveball over there, were you? All right. Mullins is the admin, so he can throw curveballs at me if he wants to. We're always waiting on the light load. I could always go back through and do the whole thing again. We'll try it again. I just won't yak so much and we'll just get through it. There we go. Now remember, when it finishes, you end up with the gold box. Same way when we did the CT ratio test. You end up with the gold box on either C phase on the CT ratio test or light load, the last test on the phantom load test. And what you can do is, if you wanted to retest any one of those, if you wanted to retest the phantom load test, the power factor test, power factor test, I could just move this up. I would just move up my gold box. I would hit retest, and it would retest just the one that's in the gold box. If I want to retest all of them, I would hit retest all. If I just wanted to redo A phase on a CT test, I would move it up one more, and then I would hit retest on the CT ratio test, because it would be A phase, B phase, C phase on the ratios. Let's say I wanted to readjust my red flex on A phase and get a better number. I would just adjust it and then put the gold box around A phase on the CT ratio test, and I would hit retest, and it would just retest that. Okay? So we're going to hit done. Date, it's going to date and timestamp the information. We've said this before, so it's going to date and timestamp it. So when you go to recall data, you can see the date and time that you performed that test. So we're going to back all the way back out, and I'm going to do the integrated site test again. We're just going to go right on through it. Just go straight to burden? Okay. Oh, 15 minutes? Oops. Okay. The director's telling me that I need to go straight to the burden test. Okay, so we will do a burden test. So remember, if we're doing tests on the CTs or PTs, then you would go to number 4, which is for the CT and PT, the instrument transformer testing. So I'm going to go to number 4. And I'm going to do a CT burden measurement test, which is number 2. The burden measurement test is unique to the PowerMaster 3 series. And what it can tell you is it can literally tell you how much burden you have on each individual phase. It uses the old V equals IR, equation, and it says if I can measure the voltage to the CT and back on each phase, and I can measure the current to the CT and back on each phase, then I can calculate the resistance, which is burden on each individual phase. So I'm going to leave these 0 right here, 0, 0, and 0, because I'm going to make a direct connection to the CTs. If they were overhead CTs, I would put the distance here, okay? I would put the distance up to those CTs here. It would calculate that off of the wire size and resistance per foot of that wire. And then and I'm going to show you two different connections here. So here's what I would do. Back at the test switch, of course I have to perform that phantom load test. I have to close those back in to complete the circuit out to the CTs and back. You know, so I'm okay there now. If I'd left that open, of course, it would have given me failure and said we got a serious problem. But now I've closed that circuit out to the CTs and back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this burden test. You want to be over here? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto my CTs here, and I'm going to make a direct connection right here with my voltage connectors right here. So I'm going to take my alligator clips off of here, because if you think about it, my duct bills are already telling me the current to the CTs and back. What I need is the voltage, because right now I'm not connected in that circuit out to the CTs and back with my voltage, so I have to get in there with the voltage so that I can use that V equals IR. So the first thing I'll do is, my returns are tied together here, so I'm going to come in with my neutral connection. I'm going to connect right there, right? And now I'm going to take these, and I'm going to make my connection right here, red, yellow, blue, ABC. So I'm going to go red, yellow, just pull it on there. There we go. So I got red, I've got my yellow, and I've got my blue. So now I'm connected on my return right here with the neutral of my voltage. Now I've got my red, my yellow, and my blue. So now that is going to tell me the voltage to each of the CTs and back. Okay? And this is going to tell me my current to each of the CTs and back. Okay? So I'm going to hit next. Now in this case we did enter in these CTs, because when you enter in the CT it tells you what the burden is on that CT, okay? So you're going to say, what is my, and it says on there, additional burden rating on that CT nameplate. Additional burden rating is besides what the meter and the CTs put in, it's all that wire connected out to the CTs and back. So that's what I'm looking for. So whatever that is, if it's 0.5 ohms or whatever that is, when you enter it in for that CT, you'll get a pass or fail, and we entered it in here. If you didn't enter that in, you could just hook it up and test those CTs. It wouldn't give you a pass or fail here, but it would definitely give you the numbers that you could see. Okay? So that's the difference. If you enter in the information on it, you'll get a pass or fail. You don't have to, just like you don't when you're doing a CT ratio test. You could just perform the test and you would still see these numbers right here. Okay? Well, the measuring of the burden is important to us because, you know, when I first started, all I heard about was the burden added. Okay, and so they would say, hey, what's, the burden, we do burden added tests. Well, as I was thinking about this, rolling down the road, because I've covered a pretty good part of the United States, I was thinking about that and said, okay, so if I keep adding burden to this CT, if I add 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, okay, and they were adding 2 and 4 ohms and putting that on the CTs, and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, if you're telling me that it's only 0.5 ohm rated, and you're going to put 4 ohms on that, I mean, think about that. That's 8 times what it's even rated for. So is that really telling you anything? Or would I be more concerned with what I'm losing every single day? Now, if I added 0.1 or 0.3 ohms, then yes, I could say that CT is right on the ragged edge, and you might want to get up there and check the connections to that CT. But if I start adding a whole lot of burden to that CT, what is it really telling me? But if I know what it is, it's the old, I can't manage it if I can't measure it. So if I can measure, and I'm supposed to only have 0.5, that's all I want max on each of those 3 phases for that CT, and I get 1 ohm, then I have a problem. And not only do I have a problem, but I can say it's on A phase. So now I can start tightening things up on A phase and say, okay, and I've had guys call me up, rolling down the road, and they say, hey, I did what you said, and I got in there with my nut driver, and I started tightening, and sure enough, I found a loose one, tightened it up. There's a lot of connections in there. Think about all those connections in there. And if one of those is loose, then the burden goes up because the resistance goes up, right? So then when they tighten it down and retest, it went from 1.2 to, 0.4. That's acceptable. But if I start getting the higher amount of burden on there, CTs don't like resistance and they don't like heat. If you put too much resistance on them, accuracy goes in the toilet. If I get them too hot, the accuracy goes in the toilet. And 99.9999% of the time, we lose, right? So this will allow you to see the burden on each of the 3 phases, and you can actually do something about it. Step 1 in the process, tighten everything down. Step 2, retest it. You see what I mean? You can actually set up a process, all right? So we got 3 passes on here, so we're okay on that. So we will hit done on that. So we have performed, I tell you what we're going to do, we're going to go previous. And now we're going to go to recall data, number 7. We talked about that earlier, so I'm going to hit number 7. And this is just a tree diagram here. So you can see here the plus over there, so I've got to expand that out. So I go down to F6, my favorite button, and I hit expand. So it's got, I had the first where I started with the integrated psych test, and then I went into where I dropped out of that. This is going to show you first, the first thing you see on the tree diagram, but you can see there's pluses next to it, so there's more to expand out. That's when the test session started. Then if I go down to one of those sessions and I hit expand, within that test session it shows each individual test is also date and time stamped. So I can go to any one of those, I can hit my CT test right here and hit select. And it shows me the result of the test. So I know I got it before I disconnect everything and I leave. I want to know that I've got my tests are in there. I can exit out of that, and I'll show you one more, which is the phantom load test still has that plus next to it, because remember, the phantom load test is comprised of 3 tests, right? Full load, light load, and power factor. So I will go down to it, and I will hit expand. And I can go down to one of those and also hit select. You just want to make sure, it just takes a second before you get ready to disconnect everything, take a look and make sure everything's in there, okay? So you can see we went through a full integrated psych test. We put everything in there for your utility. You may only want 2 or 3 of those. You could even set up more than one phantom load, integrated psych test. You could set up one for, you have some test sites that have PTs, some that don't have PTs. So that would be a different integrated psych test. You may have one that tests the meter, the CTs, and the PTs, and then you have one that's set up just the meter and the CTs. So then that way you would attach that integrated psych test to that site, and then from then on, you just hit the buttons. Next, next, or continue as we've seen. Okay? We really appreciate you guys. We've had a very consistent, and a lot of folks are tuning in every week, and we really appreciate that. And we've gotten a great feedback. So we really appreciate that as well. So thank you all a lot. God bless and be careful out there, all right? If you got any questions or want to see anything, holler at us.